everybody. Hi. I looked at my recording from last week, the combination of speaking to you in person and online. I didn't do terribly, but I'm going to try to be a little more performative for our digital audience today as well. Hi and good morning. I'm Michael Gelobter. I'm the Executive Director of the Yale Center for Environmental Justice and the lecturer for energy justice this semester. Welcome to our second lecture of the semester out of a total of 12. I realized that I didn't do quite as good a job as I wanted to of laying out the roadmap, particularly for those of you who don't look at the syllabus regularly, like those of us online. And I want to sort of give a little bit of the logic of the class before introducing our next speaker. So last week, I really tried to give an overview of kind of the range of issues in energy justice. We're starting this week really at the base of the word justice and why these things are an issue, which is organizing and bringing one of the country's leading frontline organizers in the energy justice movement. We're going to move into a discussion of renewables next week, and generally during the semester we'll be focusing a lot on implementation and doing as much as on questions of justice, because we're in this really amazing new era where, at least domestically, there's hundreds of billions of dollars devoted and supposedly flowing to energy justice communities, and internationally there should also be hundreds of billions. We're not quite there yet, unfortunately, but we should be preparing ourselves for it. God willing, it will happen. We're going to give a little bit, in another 2 weeks or so, we're going to give a little bit of a context with a guest speaker from the federal government on the IRA and what are those hundreds of billions of dollars devoted to and going to. We'll be covering issues facing indigenous communities, the labor community, the global community, and particularly the low-income communities in the global South. And we'll be focusing some, in one of the problem sets, we'll be focusing on the business of energy justice. As I was preparing this class, I was watching TV, and there was actually an energy justice TV ad by Posigen. If you all see local TV, Posigen is a New England solar company that literally advertises to low-income and communities of color to install solar. They're really pioneers. They do amazing work, and their chief marketing officer will be coming in. He wanted to take you all to see a solar installation, and I said, oh, that's old hat. They want to actually talk about how to market to energy justice, and one of the problem sets will be you all writing a script for an energy justice ad that we may enact in front of the class or something like that, depending. But he'll be looking at that as well. So that's and then we'll be wrapping up the class by talking about kind of leading edge issues, particularly philanthropy's role. And I think you'll hear from Denise today the funding challenges that communities face and the complications of bringing communities to the table for all this money and as owners and leaders. And so we'll sort of wrap the semester up with some discussion of philanthropy and how some of this work is being funded with or without federal dollars. So that's a bit more about the lay of the land of the class. Today, as I said, we're going to start the second week of the class with what's important in energy justice, which is community organizing and building power. And for that, we're very lucky to have Denise Abdul-Rahman here. Denise has a bachelor's in management, an MBA in healthcare management, and is getting her PhD at the University of Vermont in transdisciplinary leadership, creativity, and sustainability. She's really one of the country's pioneers in a variety of ways. She was foundational at the NAACP's early days of energy and climate justice work. She has been a leader in Indiana, which is a very, very difficult state to do clean energy work in and to do democracy and justice work in. And she's been at the front lines there for a long time. She is a veteran of Operation Desert Storm, facilitates the Indiana Alliance for Equity, and has recently started her own organization as the founder of Black Sunlight Sustainability. So Denise is going to speak for a bit, and then we're going to have a little bit of an interview for the broad internet audience, and then shut it down to the classroom after that. Welcome, Denise Abdul-Rahman.
Good morning. It's a honor and a privilege to be here. And I must say that I'm extremely humbled anytime that I'm asked to speak and share the story of pretty much my life's work and a journey that I had no idea that I'd be embarking on. I was a banker in the mortgage industry for like 25 years, a veteran, as mentioned. I thought I was going to go into healthcare management, And then one day I attended a NAACP meeting, and there was a spark of consciousness around environmental issues and concerns that I just have never let go. And I give a lot of credit to Jacqueline Patterson, was the national director for the NAACP, who developed many, many different reports that allowed someone like myself to be able to have the language to be able to speak to the concerns of our community. So just a little bit of grounding there on how I came here, and I'm going to try to share, and hopefully there'll be something that I share that you can take back and also move into the direction that we all hope to be in. So I want to thank Michel Gelobter and Simone, Julia Simone, for having me here. And I was asked to speak about community advocacy and organizing for energy justice. And most of my talk will be framed around the NAACP and the energy justice movement broadly. And I'd like to just sort of to mention that a lot of the work that the EJ movement works on, and that was agreed upon, are the Hermes principles of democratic organizing. So it's recommended that anytime any of us are working with community or doing something around community, that we emphasize on bottom-up organizing, basically listening to communities, letting people talk for themselves, working together in solidarity and mutuality, building just relationships among ourselves, and having a commitment to self-transformation. So my presentation will be centered around some of those dynamics. Sorry, let me work out the technology here. Okay, there we go. So I'm hoping to just kind of talk about my journey and sort of who I'm accountable to, and also a little bit of grounding, what I consider like a cultural grounding, discuss a little bit of policy, self-determination, the Inflation Reduction Act and/or Justice 40, and the global importance, loss and damage. And I'll probably move pretty quickly. I'm going to try to stick to about 30 minutes. So in regards to my journey and who I'm accountable for, and I ask you to ask yourself, as you're embarking on your journey, who are you accountable to when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing to make a difference in this world? And for me, it's some of the people here, as well as those of the African diaspora, those that were journeying across the transatlantic, the Middle Passage, those that jumped off the bows and were not able to make it. So before I go there, I'm gonna kick off with just a little poem. To fling my arms wide in some place of the sun, to whirl and to dance till the white day is done, then rest at cool evening beneath a tall tree while night comes on gently, dark like me. That is my dream, to fling my arms wide in the face of the sun, to dance and to whirl, whirl till the quick day is done, and rest at pale evening, a tall, slim tree, night coming tenderly, black like me. This poem is by Langston Hughes, and what he meant when he wrote this poem is that he was envisioning a life of being free of racial oppression. He also dreamed of ways to survive the oppression that currently exists. I've known this poem since I was like 5 years old. A woman handed us a book, wrote my name in it. But I never knew how much, I guess, why that poem meant so much to me. And I think that this is the work that I constantly do, try to fight racial oppression, try to find ways to survive and to exist in this context, and try to make a way in which we're not just surviving, but actually thriving. So my work is within a frame, at least I'd like to think, in a Black liberation framework and a system change, the ability to be free and resilient, and what are those possible pathways? And the Black diaspora, I don't know, I can't say it, diasporic, has been on a just transition for over 400 plus years. And we've had to endure, as I mentioned, the slave trade, being enslaved, Jim Crow, redlining, James Crow, who seeks to identify our children by the time they're in 3rd grade to go to the school to prison pipeline. In fact, in the state of Indiana right now, they are trying to hold a child back while they're in 3rd grade if they do not pass the basic standard test, but yet they do not require mandatory kindergarten. They have a compulsory age of 7. So continuously already setting our children up to fail and to go to the school to prison pipeline. So many of our communities are over-policed, are subject to police brutality. Our educational systems are under-resourced. We're in blighted and dilapidated housing, underemployed and unemployed. We've been the essential workers, disproportionately impacted by COVID. Hosters of polluting systems, such as fossil fuel and vehicle emissions, and most disproportionately impacted and vulnerable by the impacts of climate. We are the survivors of Trayvon, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, their traumatic murders, which catapulted us into a moment like now around racial reckoning, a racial reckoning moment. Why is any of this important? How is it connected to energy and justice, you might be asking? And I stand on the shoulders of my mother, pictured there, that fought for women's rights, went to Beijing, China, and taught young Black women at HBCUs around self-care. My big mama, who marched for jobs for justice back in 1963, and my father, who went to the Black Political Convention and fought for the Human Relations Commission and all of that. So that's where I stand and where I come from. So I'll stop to kind of say, then I gravitated and was attracted to the NAACP and its policies around its environmental and climate justice program, which it includes climate change that has disproportionately impacted communities of color, who are under-resourced communities in the United States and around the world. And we work for 3 objectives: to reduce harmful emissions, particularly greenhouse gases. We do this by trying to shut down coal plants and even natural gas plants at this time, working at the local level to try to pass ordinances, stopping the building of new toxic facilities, monitoring, and so forth. 2, we work to advance clean energy and energy efficiency. We've worked at the state level on state level campaigns for renewable energy and energy efficiency, working with unions, businesses, and trying to help do demonstration projects and helping our communities to access the revenue generation opportunities to this new green economy. And thirdly, We work to strengthen the resilience and livability of our communities. We've worked to do climate action planning, to integrate policies and practices that advance food justice, advocating for transportation equity, and so much more. So now I'd like to just ground in this video, 2 videos, in fact, and then I'll try to move into, I think, the policy. But basically, I see the energy justice as a way kind of to freedom, as a way to try to help bend the arc toward justice. So it's a conduit. It's a means to an end. Oh, and they were wearing these masks before the pandemic, so this is hashtag we can't breathe.
The city of Baytown is made of old money, lower to middle class families, and pollution. But if you get a job at a chemical plant, you don't have time to think of a solution. I guess my brother, my uncle, and my cousins are sellouts because they went industrial instead of the drug route. Refinery city lights and pipes run along the Gulf Coast. The smoke boasts with sulfur air. It's a wonder anyone's able to take a breath. We're so used to it, we forget. Soon, the sons and daughters won't be able to drink the water. They say the first priority is the people, but the people are the ones being excluded and uprooted. Just ask Archer Courts, ask George Washington Carver Elementary, or ask the Suburbanites, Exxon Sacrifice, AKA Brownwood Neighborhood. God bless social media, but Flint ain't the only case of complexion without protection. Baytown, AKA the Dirty Bay, is surrounded by giant toxins, threatening the city in every way. We see the huge still from our window sills, make jokes as we choke. We've been possibly dying from this kind of poison oak. It's no mystery that the Black and brown communities are being targeted. Black lives matter, but not when they're expendable and making money is good for the market. Give them a fine, it's fine. They can afford it. We live with the headaches, the shortness of breath, and watery eyes. They keep building, and we pay for it. Constantly trying to heal ourselves and repel the environmental destruction. Breathe it in, then breathe out.
So this one really epitomizes all the injustice, all that I probably had lifted up, all the doom and the gloom. And this next video is about sort of what the possibilities could be. And it's dated, I have to say, but it's still very good video.
The environmental justice movement was founded and most of its principles out of civil rights, basically saying that no community has a right to become the dumping grounds or to be treated unfairly and unequally based on the fact that it's poor or it's a community of color.
Environmental justice, from my perspective, involves, one, a recognition that
The thing about hip hop today is it's smart, it's insightful.
Let hip hop lead the way to a green future.
We could see a much deeper economic downturn. Global warming is real.
Fires have been fueled by high rate of asthma.
By Katrina were sure to follow, and now they are.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
Yeah, I make the track sound good. And do that, got a message for the hood. It's time to go green, we gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'ma do the same thing.
Now why your little cousin got asthma? Auntie got cancer. I know you know the problem, but you never knew the answer. You want the answer? Listen to my stanza. When it come to cold, they be stripping like a dancer. Who the company and who the boss like Tony Dancer? Maybe one day we probably get a chance to have a conversation about conservation. He'd rather condemnation, vote compensation. Look, I'm from the hood. We need better food and better air. You probably wouldn't never care. You ain't never there. Rappers never rap about it. They rather act hard while these companies doing toxic in my backyard. I'm from the hood. The refinery ain't that far. Something like my neighbor ain't doing me no favors. We need more classes, not more sales. Man, we need green jobs. We don't need no jails. I said it's time to go green. We gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'ma do the same thing.
To put the people that most need work with the work that most need done. We need funds, we can harness the sun, we can harness the wind, we can create jobs for my family and friends. And when I say I'm going green to the hood, it sound funny, but I'm talking about saving the earth and getting money. I'm talking about hundreds, thousands of M's. Do that, go pull up in a hybrid on rims. So when I hit the block, y'all, the song go knock y'all. Car on E, but the car won't stop y'all. It's electric, so it's guaranteed to shock y'all. Yeah, I'm going green and I'm straight from the block, y'all. I want the green Bentley, I ain't talking about the paint. I'm talking about the one with biofuel in the tank. So many leaders paved the way for the leaders of today. These are shoulders that we stand on, now we all hands on.
America can create millions of well-paid, green-collar jobs. We can make our streets safer and our communities healthier. We can save the planet for our children and our children's children. That is the promise of a green economy.
It's time to go green, we gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I said my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'ma do the same thing.
And we will put Americans to work, making our homes and buildings more efficient so that we can save billions of dollars on our energy bills. We need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. Develop technologies like wind power and solar power, advanced biofuel, and more efficient cars and trucks built right here in America.
Thank you so much for all the technological assistance. Both of those are, I really like those videos, and what we're trying to accomplish is basically within the context of this framework for just transition. And some of us, when we think about just transition, it's basically our communities or our society having a just transition, that we're resisting the old systems, that we're rethinking how to go forward, and that we begin to restructure. It's looking at the extractive economy, everything that is harming our communities, our society, and to moving us into a living economy where we focus more on the caring and giving types of things, and that we have a values filter that shifts the economic control to communities, that democratizes wealth in the workplace, that advances ecological restoration, that drives racial justice and social equities, relocalizes most production and consumption, and retain and restore cultures and traditions. I also want to say on the videos, it's looking at creative ways. It's looking at culturally competent ways in order to reach everyone, to make sure that everyone is included. And all of us see this energy justice differently, as a different opportunity, as a different way for our communities. So some of the things that we've been working on in Indiana and some areas nationally, but mostly this will be focused on Indiana. We have been working in the policy frame. We've done everything from like right now this session, we worked with the legislator to create community solar. We made sure that it had some aspects around community benefit agreements in it, that it had some aspects around a carve out, particularly for communities or disadvantaged communities, which the Biden administration has basically coined the term disadvantaged communities, targeting its billions of dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act to say that 40% of the funds should go to disadvantaged communities. We have a history having worked around net metering in Indiana. Net metering value in Indiana is very low now. At one time that had a basically fair and reasonable rate as you send the energy across the grid. You could get a fair amount to help reduce your energy costs. They lowered that value, so one's energy burden would still be there. You're not able to probably net zero. You're definitely not going to be able to make more. You're not going to get extra that can go towards your bill in the future. There was a bill called House Bill 1320. We call this some of the fossil fuel trickery, where they said that African Americans would be at a disadvantage if people that were more privileged and were able to access solar were able to access it and not have to pay to utilize the grid. They were able to get national Black-oriented groups to be able to say, yes, that's right. We think that solar is not going to be beneficial to Black communities. But we brought a group with us to the State House from all over the state, and we basically said that we thought that we could be the emerging market. We feel like that if there is more solar that is ramped up, that eventually the price would go down and we could have access to solar and be able to afford it. We wanted to be the emerging market. We wanted all the benefits of the jobs, because if you can build the rooftop solar locally, a person might be able to walk to work and be able to deploy that solar in their own communities. We were able to defeat that bill. It rose to national news and so forth because of our advocacy. We've been working on electric vehicle charging stations, and we've been fighting against carbon capture sequestration. The electric vehicle charging, we were able to get an amendment in a bill. We had a legislator that basically was a champion and was able to amend it to say that some of those EV charging stations must be deployed in communities of color, and into disadvantaged communities. So that was like a victory a couple of years ago. We've been building because we believe that we have to make it real in our communities, that we can't just pass policy and not make sure that everyone is seeing and understanding the benefits of clean energy. So we deployed a solar demonstration project. Our first one was in Evansville, Indiana, on the Greater St. James Community Center. And we decided we can't just put this solar up here and not have a conversation about it. So we, one, had a big convening around it. And then we also decided that we would partner and create a training for some people of color to be able to learn how to install solar. And so we called it, the National NAACP had what it called the Power Up program. And basically we implemented it in Evansville. So we partnered with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. They promised to hire them once they were trained. We created what we considered culturally competent training. This was also during the pandemic. We found an app that some people did not have access to. Laptops, the libraries were closed because of the pandemic, so they were able to use an app on their phone. We were managed to be able to do so they could complete assignments. And then we had an in-person training where they were able to learn about how they could deploy solar. And then they were hired by IBEW as helpers and given the opportunity to later on become a full-fledged apprentice and be hired in maybe higher paying jobs. We also did a demonstration project in Hammond, Indiana. It was a LED lighting. We replaced all of the lighting. It was about $35,000. But it was a savings of about 96,000 tons of carbon and equivalent to taking 16,000 cars off the highway. And so that project was in a Philistine building, which is a healthcare center. And all that savings will give them more funds to be able to do their mission and serve their community, which was predominantly like 95% community of color, Latinx, and Black folks that live in that community. And then lastly, we did a demonstration project on a Douglas Center in Kokomo, Indiana, where we installed solar there as well. And that was a historical building that Eleanor Roosevelt had been to, and it's named after Frederick Douglass. We also do a lot of educating. I facilitate a lot of meetings every other week, every week, once a month. Sometimes we have emergency meetings around different issues. And we're trying to learn how to relationship build across the nation, not just with the units that I am basically charged with supporting in my role as a state chair of environmental climate justice for NAACP, but we're also trying to collaborate with other communities and other organizations so that we can all really get a shared understanding, shared values, and build our power on how we want to transition in the state of Indiana. And we also have a keen understanding of our relationship with the Black diaspora and learning. We want to learn the best practices from across the globe, and we want them to learn what we're doing so that for our own Black liberation, we can be in alignment globally as well. On the right side here, I mentioned the Indiana Alliance for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion of Electric Vehicles, Infrastructure, and Economic Opportunities. That organizing sort of came organically. I ended up reaching out to groups all across the state, Black faith, Black business, grassroots organizations. I had no idea how much interest and excitement the entire community had around this. Everyone had different motivations. Mine was predominantly to try to reduce air pollution, to try to help our communities move into being climate resilient. But others obviously were keenly focused on the economic opportunities and wanting to be connected with it. Some of our charge is that we want to put EV charging stations like on Black-owned businesses so that they can receive the revenues from having a charging station in the location. We also want to make sure that if you build the infrastructure in our communities, then we can imagine accessing EVs. We want the EV prices to go down. We want the air pollution to go down and have our children riding on electric vehicle buses. And so if you do not build the infrastructure, then you'll have two Americas or two Indianas, where one group has access to EV charging and another does not. So that's been our real advocacy for the last 2 years. We've brought a lot of attention from the U.S. Department of Transportation. They sent representatives to our communities. We held 2 listening sessions around the issue. Excuse me, we intervened in what's called the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission around a concept around PURPA that required that there be affordability and equity in EV infrastructure. And we recently received a decision around that. It was pretty weak by way of some of the things that we asked for. We had created a 6-point plan that required some of the things I mentioned: geographic location, transparency of data, making sure that there was an equity advisory board. We had, 6 different types of things, workforce training and all of those types of things. And we're still working on that. Lastly, on this EV charging concern, we had obtained a memorandum of understanding with the city of Indianapolis, who was applying for the charging fuel infrastructure discretionary grant. And we had all of this robust equity framing in it, our 6-point plan. We had lots of Black disadvantaged community partners willing to do the training, willing to do the outreach, willing to identify who could be within the program. And unfortunately, most recently, I think it was January 11th, the U.S. Department of Transportation did not award the city of Indianapolis with the grant. They awarded 22 states for 47 projects for about $650 million. They did identify an area in Indiana that was had less population density, had no equity framing, according to one of our alliance members, had no diversity within theirs, and extremely rural, no urban, which we do not want to juxtapose the 2 groups. We also working on solar equity for all. Well, it's called solar for all, but we carved out a niche and called ours solar equity for all. We partnered with coalition groups. This is through what's called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. We got 18 letters of support. Some were from national groups. Most of them were all of our groups from across the state. We indicated that we wanted to do 450 rooftop solar projects across the state in our communities, about 50 on non-for-profits to make them into resiliency hubs. We have a couple of microgrids as part of how we want to deploy, because Indiana does not have community solar. So we thought we'd do microgrids, create a power purchase agreement. The revenue from that we distribute to the different communities that would then sort of be a part of a cooperative that we would create to be able to do like a makeshift community-owned solar model through a microgrid. Lastly, right now, the decision on that will occur in June of 2024. So we're hoping, we had to compete against the state of Indiana's agency versus this coalition. So we're hoping this coalition will end up being funded versus the state agency, unless they both can be funded. And then lastly, there's the Climate Pollution Reduction Act that's happening right now, and so many other opportunities, but these are just a few that we're working on in Indiana. And we've asked the Indiana Department of Environmental Management for a memorandum of understanding or community benefit agreement. You know, you can distribute all of these funds, like in a state of Indiana, maybe even nationally. And we think that rural and or white communities certainly deserve a transition. But what if you deploy all of it and we look and we see that only 1% of Black communities benefit, or 2%? So my charge and body of work is to try to make sure that as many dollars can possibly flow into Black and brown communities. So when we look back, we can say everyone benefited from the Inflation Reduction Act, that everyone benefited from Justice 40, because Justice 40 does not necessarily require that 40% go to communities of color. It just needs to be somewhat low income or a rural community. It can be a mixed, but it's not required. I am so sorry. Normally, okay, there we go. African Americans pay $41 billion to the energy sector and have only held like 1% of the jobs in the energy sector. In the solar industry, there were about 7%, and in the wind industry, about 8%. And women make up about 32% of the wind industry. And this is just some now imagery around some of our advocacy, just showing some of the things. We have to have our own communications. We partner with different groups to try to get our messaging out. We identified where we wanted these EV charging and invited the U.S. Department of Transportation to come down and hang out with us and go to our sites where we think it would be good to have EV charging stations. We partner with faith-based and legislators that are pictured here. And these are some of the federal officials that came to listen to us. They're in Indianapolis as well as in Gary. And some of the news that covered our advocacy, whereas the Indiana Department of Transportation in Indiana received $10 million to install charging stations. Our work was instrumental in making them have a dashboard, making them have to have equity metrics, making them have to contract minority business enterprise, and they committed to 10%, which in Indiana is pretty good, but in comparison to the city of Indianapolis, their goals are 15%, but at least there was some commitment. This is our deploying of that solar I mentioned, some of the trainings I mentioned, the Hammond Center. Our Gary group did climate action planning. This is just to show you the organizing that's happening on the ground. This was a while back when the Clean Power Plan was coming into fruition. We embarked as a region, groups from Minnesota, Wisconsin, all over. We set up a meeting with the administrator, Susan Hedman, at the time. We talked about the Clean Energy Incentive Plan and organized what we called our power. And then regarding some of the conference of parties and how that all connects, You know, I have been fortunate to be able to attend about 3 different conference of parties and mostly see how important it is to network and communicate with people that are organizing on the ground, sharing their stories. This is the Pan-African Climate Justice passing their climate torch around. This is a convening I helped to organize to the left in the press area at COP27 so that we could talk about a racism and climate reparations resolution that we were getting many, many different signatures on. You know, the connectivity around what we do as a developed nation versus undeveloped nations and our responsibilities when we are a major contributor to carbon pollution. And these countries that are suffering all the damage that are not even utilizing electricity, but are the ones that are suffering the most from our energy use. And so there's what they call the Loss and Damage Fund, which asks all of the different nations that are partners of the Conference of Parties to contribute to this Loss and Damage Fund. I believe it was the COP27 in Egypt last year where it was finally approved that there would be this Loss and Damage Fund. And then apparently this year at the COP28 in Dubai, they actually began to fund it. The United States pledged 17.5 million, which was considered to be very low in comparison to many of the other countries. But my understanding, they contributed low because of all of the politics, because they do have to make sure that the funds get approved and actually make it to this, what they want to refer to as a climate impact fund versus calling it loss and damage because the term is considered too controversial. The demand, this fund is a demand to channel monies to the developing countries to help them to cope with the impacts of climate change that have stymied their progress, has been stymied, and the progress has been halted for so long. So we'll see if how these funds will work. There's also controversy in making underdeveloped nations to have to borrow this money when they really have nothing to do with all the calamities that are happening. Then they have to borrow the monies and then the calamities happen again. And so it keeps perpetuating them being in debt. So how do we ensure energy justice when we think about, I guess, a global frame, making sure others have access? One of my colleagues talked about how the children have to study in the dark. They don't have access to light. And so they created like a solar village and put, you know, solar on one place and the children can go there to be able to read at night. I mean, those are the dynamics of what we're talking about with energy justice. I will stop there. Thank you. If there's any questions, and here's just a few of the resources that you can look at that were very instrumental for me in my journey. Thank you.